If you didn't love that finish, I don't know what to tell you. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Good lord, was that a battle. Obviously, I just got done, and I mean just got done watching like 10 minutes ago, the Chicagoland race for the Cup Series. The first race for NBC this season. It's the only race they need. Kyle Busch got the win, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about everything that led up to it because there was a lot. And we'll talk about Kyle Busch winning because, I mean, he did win. He deserves it. I know y'all probably want me to talk about the finish to this thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to briefly talk about the race as a whole, as a mile and a half, as a typical NASCAR Cup Series race. I thought the racing from start to finish, not just that final lap, was outstanding. That's the kind of quintessential racing that I expect from NASCAR and that I really, really like. Chicagoland's a mile and a half track that's kind of right there. It's in its prime right now. It's the type of track that has 2 or 3 grooves that are all pretty much equally good and that different cars will be better at different times. We saw how like Kyle Larson was really, really good up at the very top, or like how Kevin Harvick or Clint Bowyer were really good right around the bottom. This track, the fact that it has multiple grooves, really allows for more passing. Not everyone's trying to get stuck in each other's wake or dirty air because they're all stuck around the bottom or something. Current Chicagoland reminds me a lot of how Texas used to be. It's been a little while since Chicagoland has been repaved. Its track is rough on tires, but not too rough. You know, like there's Atlanta, which is extremely rough on tires. And I think that's a little too far that direction. But then there's tracks like current Texas, which has been recently repaved and reconfigured, or like Kansas, that has also been pretty recently repaved. Those tracks, you know, the racing there's just not as good because the surface is too sticky and too new. They have become one groove racetracks. Atlanta has become one groove around the top and your tires die after one lap. Chicagoland, meanwhile, is right in that sweet spot. It's the best mile and a half track on the circuit right now. And this race proved it because we saw comers and goers throughout the race. People could pass, not just on restarts, you could pass during the run because there was always a lane open. It was an outstanding race, if you ask me. Not just that final lap, which was obviously one of the best of all time. So let's talk about some of the big drivers, big key events from today's race, shall we? Early on, Stewart-Haas Racing dominated this race. Eric Almirola led a lot early on and actually won stage 1, which is his first career stage win. And fun fact, he led more laps in this race than Danica Patrick ever led in that 10 car. I don't mean to bash Danica, but it's just proof that that car was never as bad as maybe we thought. Early on, it looked like Clint Bowyer could have one of the best cars, but he made several pit road errors in a row during stage 1 that put him way behind. First, he was speeding on pit road, then he sped, serving the penalty, then he didn't do a stop and go, so he had to pit like 3 or 4 times during the green flag run, and that stuck him 2-3 laps down. It took him a little while to get back, but eventually he did get to the lead lap, so we'll talk about him more a little later on. After winning stage 1, stage 2, Almirola looked just as good. Didn't look like very many people could really compete with him, but then his crew, loose wheel. He had to pit from the lead with a loose wheel, fell down a lap. He too would get back on the lead lap later on, but this ruined his second stage. From there, the only 2 Stewart-Haas cars remaining on the lead lap were Kurt Busch and Kevin Harvick, and they battled back and forth. It looked like Kurt Busch was going to be able to hang on to get that second stage win, but Kevin Harvick around the final corner, as a matter of fact, was able to get to his outside, and Kevin Harvick, the closer, won stage 2. And this caused Kurt Busch to be pretty upset over the radio. He seemed very angry that his teammate would race him that hard and pass him with half a lap to go. And that I didn't really understand because Harvick seemed to obviously be the slightly faster car for about 15 or 20 laps. Kurt Busch was just doing a good job of not making a mistake and taking away the 4 cars line, but at the end of the day, you gotta earn the stage points, Kurt. You can't just sit here and be like, why'd you pass me, buddy? But anyway, stage 3 was a little wild, at least at first. Had a couple restarts, had a lot of pit strategy, guys taking no tires, 2 tires. The Penske cars were up front for a little while after trying some pit strategy, so things got interesting. But at the end of the day, it was the big 3, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. right there in the top 3 or 4 towards the end of stage 3. Kevin Harvick honestly looked like the class of the field, but Kyle Busch's pit crew got him the lead during a caution with about 60 laps to go, and that was huge. Kyle Busch was in control of the restart. He was able to hold on to the lead. That clean air was what allowed him to kind of pull away, and that made it difficult for anybody to catch him. The final 20 or 30 laps or so, Kyle Larson, rim riding that high side, inches from that outside wall, was able to start knocking off 1/10, 2/10, 3/10 a lap off of Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick as he started to fly through that top 5 towards the lead. Larson was able to easily get by Kevin Harvick, and he spent the final 15-20 laps reeling Kyle Busch, reeling him in. With about 6 laps to go, Larson just barely got into the wall, but thought it was over. But then that pesky lap traffic, led by none other than the legend himself, Ryan Newman, probably the most annoying lap car in NASCAR history, screwed things up for Kyle Busch. Along with a few other drivers, they're battling for position at the tail end of the lead lap. This really made things difficult for Kyle the last couple laps and allowed Larson to close up immensely. And that all led into what was probably one of the most epic final laps in NASCAR Cup Series history. The lap traffic had slowed up the 18 car just enough that Larson had a huge run heading into turn 1. He tried a slide job on the 18 car and almost worked. Larson drifted up the racetrack, was not able to clear Kyle Busch, so actually clipped him in the left rear. They both hit the wall a little bit, slowed them both down. They were literally door to door going down the backstretch. Larson was able to slightly pull away heading into turn 3, but that just opened the door for Kyle Busch to drive right through the back of Larson, spinning the 42 car around. Kyle himself went up and hit the wall again, but both cars were able to limp to the finish line in that 1-2 spot, with Kyle Busch edging Kyle Larson for his fifth victory of the season. Obviously a very exciting finish. Both drivers were pretty cool with each other after the race as well. Larson knew that, it was a dirty move getting up and running into the 18 car on the last lap, so he had no hard feelings when Kyle Busch obviously chose to spin him out. I think both guys were pretty chill at the end of the race because I think they just understood exactly the situation each other were in. So whether you like him or not, I know not everyone's a huge Kyle Busch fan. I can't believe people were still hating on that finish just because Kyle Busch won. It was a great finish. Kyle Busch, hate him, love him, whatever. It was an outstanding finish, and I wish we could see more things like that in NASCAR. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the top finishing results. Obviously the big three of Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex, all there in the top 4, with Kyle Larson, who a lot of people seem to think is maybe the best Chevy car on a consistent basis. Obviously they're in the top 5 as well. Clint Boyer, who I know I mentioned earlier, had all those speeding issues. He was able to fight back, got a lucky break on a caution to get back on the lead lap earlier than maybe he would have been able to otherwise. But from there he obviously was able to drive through the field, had a top 5 car, finished 5th. So a very strong recovery from that 14 team. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, just because that's a very championship level kind of performance. Things don't go your way, you still have a good car, you don't give up on it, and you don't let things spiral out of control. Things are as bad as they could have been. You went from leading the race to like 2-3 laps down early on. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets, but they kept their cool and got a top 5 out of it. And I think that, that obviously says a lot about them. Eric Jones, 6th, had a very quiet day, but was consistently around 8th to 10th place, 6th place finish, pretty good for him. As a team, it felt like Joe Gibbs Racing had a pretty quiet day. Truex was often the best running Toyota. Obviously, Kyle Busch got to the lead late, and he obviously won the race. But there you see Jones 6th, Hamlin 7th, even Daniel Suarez 11th. So all 4 Gibbs cars top 11. Pretty good run, and Truex in there as well. Hendrick Motorsports, a very up and down day. Chase Elliott, I know he finished 19th, but for most of the race, he was in the top 6 or 7, occasionally was in the top 5. Looked like he maybe, if things went his way, could compete for the win. I didn't actually see what happened to him late in the race, but he fell way back, just collapsed, finished 19th, like I said. The highest finishing Hendrick car ended up being Alex Bowman in 10th, which is solid. Again, kind of a quiet Alex Bowman day where he runs 10th to 15th and finishes somewhere around there. Johnson 14th, William Byron 20th. Disappointing, I have to say, for Hendrick Motorsports. They're not ready. They still have time. The summer's really just begun, but Hendrick Motorsports is still not where they need to be. Jamie McMurray, 12th. Paul Menard, who won the pole. Shout out to Paul Menard for winning the pole. Finished 13th. Penske, as an overall organization, they had to play some strategy to kind of run with the leaders. They're clearly not at the same level that their Ford counterparts with the Stewart-Haas teams are. Penske's still lagging a little bit behind, but a top 10 for Keselowski and Logano. Blaney had a good car, but he had issues and didn't get the finish. Not pictured is Eric Almirola, who I know I mentioned won stage 1, had that loose wheel that cost him stage 2. He got back on the lead lap, but lo and behold, another loose wheel late in the race is what caused him to finish 25th, I believe. So wow, that's really a disappointing day for Almirola, because this looked like it could be a career race for him. So all in all, a pretty interesting finishing order, even though the big 3 still up there at the top of the pylon. That's not very indicative of how most of the race went, and I think that's something to build on for a lot of these teams. So there are your notable finishers, notable results. I'll go into more depth this week about how some of these guys did, and I'll talk about anything that comes after this race, but I want to wrap up the show by just talking about that final couple laps a little bit more. There's been a lot of talk about how NASCAR needs to look in the future. What kind of racing do we want to see? How should it be run? A lot of people hate on mile-and-a-half tracks, and in a lot of cases for pretty good reasons. Mile-and-a-half tracks like a Chicagoland often don't produce the best racing. Ever since NASCAR ran those restrictor plates at the All-Star race, they've continued to look and go more in depth as to how those could be used in the future. And I've been saying on the show, and many other people have been saying around the NASCAR community, that restrictor plates, we don't want them. They're not the answer. Leave them at Daytona. Maybe they'll use them in the All-Star race, that's fine, but we don't want them anywhere else. I hope NASCAR gets that message, and I hope after we see what was honestly a great race, start to finish from Chicagoland, I hope that they saw that, and I hope the fans react positively enough to it that NASCAR maybe backs off on the idea that restrictor plates are the future and the answer to everything. Like I said earlier, this Chicagoland race reminded me of like old Texas races, or maybe some old Atlanta races, or even some old Charlotte races. There's a sweet spot for these 1.5 miles where the track surface is just perfect, and you get racing like this with multiple grooves, which is what I really like. I don't mind when the field gets strung out, as long as you're able to gain on people and pass them. And for the most part, we saw that at Chicagoland. Say what you will about the aero package, it could still be better, but at least when you have a racetrack like Chicagoland, it doesn't seem to matter how iffy the aero package is, things still work. So I just want to make that plea to NASCAR that this is what 1.5 mile tracks are capable of. And I hope that most of the fan base likes this and wants this. Obviously, I can't sit here and make everyone change their opinion or think a certain way, but I hope that the majority of fans like what they saw here this weekend, because I know I did, I know a lot of other people did, and I really think that this is what NASCAR should be striving for in the future. This is what NASCAR was built on: good racing with a lot of passing, a lot of comers and goers, an exciting, dramatic finish. That's what NASCAR is built on, and this race at Chicagoland gave us that. This is what NASCAR should be pushing towards, and I hope they're able to do that. So anyway, that's my manifesto for today's episode. I gotta have a manifesto every episode, that's kind of how I build this. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm still so hyped. Like, my heart has still been like beating heavily since that race, because I was super excited to get to sit in front of the camera and talk about it, because that was awesome. Thanks for watching. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. Check those links out down below. Thank you to our wonderful Patreon sponsors. You too can be a Patreon sponsor for just $5 a month. You can have your name, and you can support every single episode for that month. So I really appreciate you guys at least checking out that link as well down below. I got Doubly Cup Series Tournament. A new season of stop motion racing is coming out next weekend. So I'll make some more videos this week leading up to that, but keep an eye out for some more stop motion races. Throwing it back, I guess. But yeah, thanks to everyone so much for watching. Share this with the NASCAR fans in your life. It means a lot to me. I always love seeing new viewers and new people commenting. Really means a lot to me. I'm glad this show is able to reach as many race fans as possible, because I think NASCAR is one of the, if not the greatest sports in the world, and I think that it's got one of the best communities, one of the most passionate communities for sure. So thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you guys again later this week. Have a great rest of your Sunday.